Okay, we have a decent group here, so I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. Looks like folks are still joining us, but welcome everyone. We are going to share more about our framework for prioritizing capital projects. I am Andrea Swayatoka. I'm the Deputy Chief of the Division of Facilities Management. I have a few other colleagues on here as well. Julie, if you could introduce yourself, and if DJ is still on as well.
Hi, I'm Julie Morris, the Director of the Department of Planning and Construction.
Good afternoon, DJ Conley, Capital Budget Manager.
Thank you both. They will be manning the Q&A for us, so feel free to put questions in the Q&A throughout the presentation. We'll also have time at the end. It's a fairly short presentation to lift up those questions as well, but they'll try to respond to them in the chat. For anyone that's been tracking this, this is the exact same presentation that we gave on August 21st to the Board of Education, and we also gave the same presentation last Thursday night, September 4th. So it's not new. If you joined any of those other ones, you're welcome to listen in again, but didn't want to think that there was new information being shared, just trying to give people numerous opportunities to learn about this and give us feedback on it as well. So with that, I'm going to take us through the presentation here. Full screen. Okay. So what we're here, we're excited to be here to talk to you about. This is something a little bit different for us in terms of sharing with you all before the Capital Improvement Plan, or the CIP, comes out in October of every year. We're here to sort of share what our framework is as we are considering projects that will go into the superintendent's recommendation to the Board of Education. And how are we trying to use data to help drive those decisions? So we have 5 sort of ideas and bullets here to talk through. Our primary metric is that we are transitioning away from the key facility indicators, or KFIs, to facility condition index, FCI. And I'll try not to use acronyms too heavy in this presentation, but you will hear FCI probably most heavily used. And that's really the central driver for our decision-making framework. Really trying to be as transparent as possible. We launched a new FCI website on August 21st when we did this first presentation to the Board of Education. I'll have the team throw that website link into the chat if you haven't had a chance to look at it. It posts all of the numerical and the actual full reports of the facility condition assessments for the first 50 plus schools that we have assessed in the portfolio. And we'll dig into a little bit more on what that report means and what the FCI depleted value means later in this presentation. Also taking into account additional holistic criteria. So while physical building conditions is the primary driver, also taking into account elements such as utilization, educational adequacy, enhanced student needs, swing space availability, often also referred to as holding centers. All of that is really key in making our decisions for the capital projects. Also taking into account advancing progress. So we want to build on the great momentum that we have made with the major capital project program, really considering pursuing innovative approaches to renovation and replacement, and moving beyond sort of business as usual approach for us. And then certainly why we are here today, the stakeholder engagement, really allowing our ability to partner with you all as a community to promote transparency and foster shared ownership of this decision-making framework. And that's really where the Q&A comes in for us today. If you have thoughts and feedback as potentially you've started to digest some of this information, we would welcome that today. As we do anything on the facility management team, it is important that we are always aligning with the strategic plan. Most of our work falls within Goal 3 to ensure a safe, welcoming, and inclusive learning and work environment. So where are we today? We have a number of slides that sort of talk about the current state of our schools. We operate 137 traditional elementary schools and 65 secondary schools, and you can see the average age of each of those. So the bulk of our portfolio is falling into this 25 to 50-year-old range. We still have a number that are over the 50-year mark, but again, we have over 100 facilities that fall in that 25 to 50 year. And that's really important. We have this aging infrastructure that we need to figure out, how are we making improvements systematically across the county. So as we look ahead, what does this mean for our long-term facility life cycle plan? And while the most immediate thing that will come out in October is the 6-year capital improvement plan, the decisions that we are making in there, we are really trying to be thoughtful about mapping this out for the next 20 years with the goal to pursue sustainable funding plan and a strategic roadmap that incorporates life cycle benchmarks. So the 3 here align with also how the state refers to them. And I think that's important that our terminology and the way we approach them aligns with the state funding that is available. So a renovation should ideally occur every 25 years. This does not mean a new school or replacement. This just means that you're upgrading at least 5 systems. That could be an HVAC, a roofing, a plumbing, an electrical project, and that you're proactively addressing aging infrastructure. Now this entire presentation is really talking about renovations. Next, I'm going to talk about renewal and replacement. This does not take away any of the great work we've been doing at sort of what we call countywide or systemic projects. So we envision still keeping all of those projects. We will continue to do standalone HVAC projects, standalone roofing projects. That will not go away, and you will very much see those in the upcoming CIP. Again, this is focused more on the larger projects, the renovation, the renewal, and the replacement. So a renewal is something that it takes place roughly every 50 years, certainly by the time you get to 70 years, and is a comprehensive interior reconstruction. So you are gutting the building. You are taking everything down to really that structure, and then building everything new. So when you walk into that facility, it is going to feel brand new to you. You might get there also in a renovation, but there might be some elements that remain in a renovation versus a renewal. Again, is that really that gut? And if for some reason the existing structure that was built, is not deemed to stay, then we would move into the third option, which is the replacement. And again, only if that renewal is not feasible, where it's a complete demolition and new construction of a facility. And I think people are most familiar with that because that is the majority of what we have done in this county. So let's talk a little bit about closing the gap. How do we get there in the next 20 years? And we're going to break it down by elementary and secondary. So given the current age of our elementary schools, more than 60% of our elementary schools are eligible for a renovation, right? So more than 60% of them fall at 25 years or older. And you can see the breakdown here on the screen of 1 to 25, the 26 to 50, and older than 51. And so in order to reach our long-term goals, thinking about this from a 20-year plan, we will need to renovate, renew, or replace 6 to 7 elementary years per year for the next 20 years. Very similar stats when we look at the secondary. Secondary is in the similar boat where almost 60% of our secondary schools are eligible for a renovation. And you can see the breakdown here. Because we have fewer secondary, in order to reach that long-term goal, we will need to renovate, renew, or replace 3 secondary schools for the next 20 years. So we wanted to talk about it in terms of expected useful life of a system. This bar chart just shows you sort of a snapshot of some of the major systems and elements in a building that I think people are most familiar with and that we talk a lot about, and what their expected useful life is. So we give painting as an example. HVAC and roof are often top of mind for people. Both have approximately a 20-year expected useful life. Elevators are closer to 30, and then you'll see, exterior and interior walls closer to that 50-year mark. These are an average across different components of an HVAC system will need to be replaced sooner, but it gives you sort of a best guess or a good example of some of those expected useful lives. And nearly 2/3 of the MCPS elementary and secondary schools are more than 25 years old. That's what we saw on one of those earlier slides. And so to address the broader range of the facilities needs across the district, prioritizing renovations over only replacement projects will become necessary and essential as we move through the upcoming capital improvement plan. So we have 2 examples to talk through in terms of just purely a standalone system that could be done as a standalone project or could be wrapped up into a renovation or replacement project. So I mentioned roofing. If they're, the expected useful life for a roof is approximately 20 years. If you take into account our portfolio of the 200 plus schools, MCPS should be replacing approximately 10 roofs per year. And sort of put that in context of what we have been doing over the last 3 years, MCPS has averaged 5 roofs per year. And that includes not just a standalone roof project, but also roofs taking place at replacement facilities as well. We also anticipate that we have a need of approximately 175 million in today's construction dollars in order to replace roofs that are 20 years or older. And we're not talking about roofs that are, 17, 18, getting close to that 20-year mark, just 20 years and older. Very similar stats as we think about HVAC. So it too has an expected useful life of 20 years. If we think of our portfolio size, we should be replacing about 10 HVAC systems per year. And over the last 3 years, we have been replacing about 5 per year. That could be standalone HVAC projects, again, or it could be an HVAC project as part of a replacement building. Now, the dollar value to replace HVAC is much, much higher than it is for roofs. So we also did an analysis of what our current need is, and we believe we have about $740 million in today's construction dollars. Be mindful that that is going up every day as we speak to replace HVAC systems that are past their expected useful life. So let's talk about the key components of the CIP framework. So in order for us to develop the FY27 to 32 CIP that will launch October 13th, so just under a little bit under or over a month, there are a few key components that we are considering. So we've talked about updated facility condition index, or that FCI, on the web page. We've completed the first assessment that we feel are the oldest facilities in the county and in the district. All facilities will be assessed that were built before 2023 over the course of this academic year, and those will be posted as we go to the website. I think one of the questions we've gotten in doing this presentation a few times is, if my school is not on the website currently and wasn't in that first round of 50 that was assessed, does that mean I won't be in the CIP? That is not the case in terms of when we think about our countywide and systemic projects. So we have a very good database of all of our roofs across the school district, same for all of our HVAC. We already know what needs to be replaced, and so we have those in the queue. Same for a field replacement, our planned life cycle assessment projects as well. So there will be schools that are included in the CIP that are not in this first 50, again, for more systemic projects that are known. The other piece here is the criteria for CIP prioritization that is considered. So building on that FCI data, thinking about additional criteria, and we'll talk about that in an upcoming slide. And then we are also working to update the regulation, the FAA, as well as the policy. So here's a quick screenshot of what the FCI website looks like. It gives a couple paragraphs of intro and explanation as to what a facility condition assessment is and when those initially were conducted, and we'll update as we go over the course of this year. And then if you scroll down on this webpage, you'll find a table, and it lists the schools broken out by elementary versus secondary, and you can click on a summary report. It's a 4-page report, as well as the full report if you're interested in digging in more. So in there, within this assessment, while it has a ton of detail, it talks about every single system that's in there. This is all about the systems and condition of the building. There is also something that is called the facility condition depleted value. That is on the table on the main website. And within each report, at the end of that 4-page report, and within the first couple pages of the larger report, you'll see, this is a screenshot from one of them, the FCI depleted school is, and it'll give a score from 0 to 1. 0 being new systems, brand new building, all working its way all the way up to 1 being the oldest system. It is absolutely in need of replacement. That depleted value quantifies the depleted life and value of a facility's primary building assets, systems, components. So some of the major systems, right? So your roofs, your windows, walls. The FCI depleted value metric are useful for estimating levels of spending necessary to achieve and maintain a specific level of physical condition. So I think, a good example I know that we gave during the board meeting too is that as we replace just a standalone roof project or an HVAC project, that number will go down closer to zero away from one. So a good example this summer, we did two big projects at Monocacy Elementary. We did a complete HVAC replacement and a restroom upgrade for them. That has one of the highest FCI numbers of the first 50 that we assessed. We're actually out there reassessing it to really capture the new improvements that were made. And that number, it won't go to zero because there's still, more things that need to be done, but will certainly go down because of the improvements made. And that's what you want to see happen. This is just an overall table of contents of what is in the regulation, the FAA, that guides a lot of this decision-making framework. We will be updating section 4, the facility planning analysis, that is where the KFI, the key facility indicators, is located, and we will be changing that to FCI. And then in the facility planning decision-making framework, section 6, we will be adding the criteria that I will show. Okay, so the proposed criteria that we have for the CIP, we've talked a lot about building condition as the primary factor and the driver for this. We will be using that as 50% of our criteria as we prioritize projects, and that goes back to that FCI depleted value. The other things that we think are important to consider and have criteria and overall weight are educational adequacy. So that includes things like access to daylight in your core learning spaces, air quality, and classroom sizes relative to the educational specification standards. We have enhanced student needs, so taking into account farms data across the various schools, and then building utilization. Are we within the ideal 80 to 100%, or are we overutilized? So next steps for us. This is our last community information session. So grateful for those that could join us today. We continue to get feedback on this, answering the Q&A and these information sessions. This is the presentation from August 21st to the board. Just for consistency, we've been using that, but we actually are going to the policy committee. We did not go last week. We were bumped off that agenda. We will be there next week on the 16th, so you didn't miss it if you were looking for us on the 3rd. The technical revisions will be presented to the policy committee. Again, in the policy, because the criteria for the decision-making framework does not show up in the policy, the technical updates will really be that transition from the KFI to the FCI. And then those proposed edits will go to the board, the full board, on September 25th. And then ultimately what I think most people care about is what does this look like for the rest of the fall related to the capital improvements plan. So the document, the big CIP that we produce, which is the superintendent's recommendation, will get published on October 13th. The following day, that will be followed by a presentation to the board, and we consider that the preliminary work session with the board. And then you'll see throughout October and November, we move through a number of public hearing opportunities and board work sessions as well. So you'll have additional and ample time to provide any public comment on the superintendent's recommendation. And then just closing with the final slide, same slide that we shared at the beginning. We're really excited to be here to be sharing this with people well in advance of the capital improvement launching in October around that framework that we are using. So with that, I'm going to stop on the presentation and maybe have Julie and DJ chime in if there are questions that are easier to verbalize as opposed to in the chat.
Sure. So one of the questions is, will you adjust the proposed criteria for school populations and facilities that aren't in their home schools, like the Blair Ewing Center?
Not sure I'm totally following that question, Julie. If you are, want to rephrase it to me?
So I think this is asking, there's a lot in here about North Lake Center in particular.
Okay.
So maybe that question will be partly answered by this question. Um, so North Lake was in the red from the 2019 assessment. Is there a demand to use the facility, and are they a key factor for all other rebuilds? Shouldn't the holding schools be prioritized and repaired before students are moved in?
Yeah, great question. We are having the third party assess all of our holding schools. So that includes North Lake, that includes Grosvenor, that includes Fairland. Definitely missing another one, but Radnor. They are assessing. We do need, and we know that we need to do projects at each of those, whether it's HVAC upgrades or window replacement or roof. We are taking that into consideration as part of the CIP and certainly trying to take advantage. We have alt ed at North Lake, but as a school comes out, if there's a gap in there, trying to take advantage to doing some upgrades before we move in new schools. So that is very much in the consideration for our capital projects. I don't know, DJ, if there's anything else you want to add about the holding schools, but we do agree that there needs to be improvements made at all of those.
So this is a question about air quality specifically. How is it assessed and measured, or is it based on the age of the infrastructure?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have air quality sensors. They're called attune sensors in all of our core classrooms in every single facility. Those were added as part of a COVID enhancement done a few years ago. So we have data that can be pulled from those, and those are measuring things like humidity and temperature and particulate matter and VOC. And so based on the data that we can pull from that, coming up with sort of metrics, very detailed metrics, I'll say, of making sure that the rooms are within their relative humidity, making sure that they're within sort of the approved levels of CO2 is another one. And so using each of those, so we don't have to go or walk around, like we have the data readily available for us in each of the facilities that we can use, which is great.
Okay, there is a question or statement. There's broad awareness of the HVAC issues across many schools, primarily due to neglect and cost, but now there is a huge backlog of HVAC replacements needed. What is the best way for parents to advocate for HVAC replacements?
Chime in, DJ.
Yeah, I think, and there's similar questions about relocations of programs and how do I advocate for my school getting a replacement or an addition. We will be having multiple CIP public hearings. And those dates I can put in the chat as well. But that would be your time. You can obviously advocate at any business board meeting. They'll take public hearings there as well. But there will be specific public hearings dedicated to the CIP.
I'm gonna also throw, scroll down. What I shared was like a snip of the timeline I put in the chat, our CIP. Just screen share real quickly, Julie. You're doing this live, everyone. So this is the MCPS CIP sort of landing page. If you really want to dig in, these are all the chapters that go into the CIP. But the schedule is always published. This was shared at the end of June. If you go down to the very last one, it'll list the upcoming CIP, and you can click on this PDF. I'll start with the list of schools, but it'll have all those upcoming dates. So the same ones I shared on the screen. I only took us through November because I think that's what is top of mind for most people, but it'll take you all the way through how it works its way through the county executive office, ultimately to county council. It's quite long. It keeps going all the way to really getting to an approval in May.
All right, this is about Cold Spring Elementary. Can you explain why the FCI assessment doesn't mention that the school classrooms lack walls? It says acoustics are less than 55 decibels. How is that possible?
Great question on the acoustics. Potentially could have been, based on I don't know what time of day that they were there and assessing, so it might not have been at the height of when. But I think that's why it's really important, like a Cold Spring. It is our last open school um, facility, and we're very aware of that. While we are taking into facility condition, and it's really important, we felt it was really important to also include a few other criteria. And so the lack of walls in Cold Spring, you would start to see in this educational adequacy access to daylight, because they don't, not all the classrooms do, because there's a lot of interior classrooms, right, where there's no walls. So that might not be factored in that FCI number, although they too have a very high one at Cold Spring, but it would also be taken into account in the educational adequacy piece.
All right. To what extent will there be consideration for schools which have serious core problems, such as those with poor ratings of HVAC and plumbing, like Wooten High School, as opposed to FCI ratings? I think this question might be getting at countywide.
Yeah. So in our CIP, and we will continue to do this, it's a really important part of any K-12 capital, right? You're always going to need to be doing both standalone HVAC or roofing projects. Like a good example, we did a full roof replacement at East Silver Spring Elementary School this summer. We did several HVAC projects, like I mentioned, Monocacy and Harmony Hills, both received, no other improvements but that HVAC. We will need to continue to do those in addition to renovation, renewal, and replacement. So even if the overall FCI, doesn't get a school all the way up for a replacement or renewal or renovation, that does not mean they might not still have a 25-year-old HVAC system, and we could absolutely move forward with the replacement for that. So hopefully you'll start to see some of that in October, where things might not be quite at the replacement level yet, but do need standalone system replacements.
There are some questions and concerns specific to Silver Spring International Middle School, essentially asking what the plans are, which will be shared in the CIP. But anything, Andrea, to add to that?
No, I mean that one continues to very much. I think it's on our radar. It is considered in part of this CIP. Probably not much more to share until the full CIP recommendation is published in October. But we are very aware of the ongoing issues both there and at the elementary school too.
So there are a few questions about checking, and then how would the FCI be corrected? How would people who think there are corrections needed be able to, I guess, submit those questions or concerns?
Yes, I would love for you to go through your principal, and they can absolutely reach out to myself and DJ and Julie if you feel like there are errors or any corrections that need to be made.
Okay. So what about someone's asking about the former Rock Terrace School, and is renovation work currently budgeted for that facility?
And chime in.
Yeah, we currently do not have dollars to make renovations right now. It doesn't mean we can't this upcoming CIP though. And they were identified to be looked at with their FCI for many reasons. Many of which have been brought up, relocation of programs and other things.
Someone asked if we're considering geothermal for HVAC for new projects. The answer is yes. Uh, Someone brought up a concern about Flower Valley Elementary School and the mold problem. They're saying that there's a loud dehumidifier. When will HVAC and climate controls be repaired? And has there been an analysis of the sound levels?
I don't believe we've done an analysis of the sound level specific at Flower Valley. Yes, we have definitely had ongoing moisture and humidity issues there, and certainly the goal is to actually take away the dehumidifiers, which I understand can be very noisy and loud. By solving the moisture and humidity, we have had a third party out there assessing and trying to make some additional recommendations beyond what the team has done. But we are continuing to look at that school to improve the moisture and humidity controls there.
Uh, Other than FCI, what else will be considered for the CIP recommendation?
So it'll be the same four criteria that are on slide 15 of the presentation. So it's taking into consideration the FCI, as well as the educational adequacy, the enhanced student need, and the utilization. And I will put into the chat, it's on board docs, the presentation. So let me put this in here, and then everyone should have access to it. Again, slide 15 is the criteria that we are proposing.
Andrea, there's a couple questions about Damascus Elementary School. Uh, One is about the electrical system, and then the other is about staff toilet issue, and also about the electrical.
Yes, so we need to do some significant electrical upgrades. It is definitely a temporary solution that is there right now. That will happen. That's separate and will be done outside of the CIP. We are trying to schedule that closely on one of the upcoming student days off, so it's not to be disruptive to staff and students, and working closely with school leadership to identify those 2 days, looking at the day in September that students are off or one of the first days in early October. So again, that will happen outside of this current round of the CIP. And then I know even as of on Friday, we had plumbers there working to resolve plumbing issues and backup. And so I haven't gotten a full assessment yet from the team if there's larger systemic issues there. That quite possibly could be the case. We have, quite old. We had several that happened last week from a plumbing. You can tell people are back in the building. We have some very old, terracotta sanitary lines that are outside the building, and they get tree roots that are in them. It goes back to like this aging infrastructure need that we have, and need to keep working to replace many of those across the portfolio.
So there's a question about what is the status of mold remediation and dehumidification at New Hampshire Estates Elementary?
I am not aware. So if there's a current mold issue, please work with your school leadership. They should always be submitting a work order to our team, along with we use an IAQ complaint form that can be attached as well to that. Most of our school leaders know how to do that quite well, or our building service managers. And we continue to address those as they come up. I know New Hampshire Estates has had significant issues over the years, even as late as last winter and into the spring. We did do some construction work this summer along that back stairwell, and added some drainage to try to divert the water away from those lower level classrooms. When I was there on the first day of full school, things seemed to be in decent shape, but certainly let us know if there's been new experiences or issues there. It is one we've been tracking closely given the historical issues.
And we do have an HVAC project in design. We're actually wrapping up design. So it is actively being pursued.
Okay, this question is, are HVAC replacements called out in the CIP by cluster, or is this reserved for large scale renovations? what's the best way to see which schools are in the pipeline?
So you can go to page 1-12 in this past master plan. That'll show you all of the state CIP projects that are state eligible. So you'll find some roofing and HVAC projects that we've applied for state funding. That's the easiest way. We do also perform other HVAC and roof systemic projects um, at some of our closed schools and things like that. So those wouldn't show up in that chart, but most of them will show up in that chart in chapter 1.
I have not been keeping up with the chat and Q&A like DJ and Julie have been and scanning it. I know that HVAC is certainly top of mind for everyone. I would say it's where our greatest need is. It is the most expensive system outside of structure to replace for us. And so I guess I just want to say sort of broadly, I see one about college gardens. We are certainly not trying to hide the fact that we have significant HVAC issues across the district. We feel we have a good understanding of which ones need to be replaced. We just need to work closely with our superintendent and with the board and all the way through county council to really increase the opportunity for us to make a bigger dent in the issues that are ongoing. Hopefully that slide was very transparent that, when and we should have been replacing far more systems, again, even just focused in on HVAC than we do. So every time we don't do that, we are setting ourselves further and further behind.
All right, so we've got a question about how green space plays in. And this is particularly about Roberto Clemente Middle School.
Hmm.
They say the green space is unappealing, and will there be a budget or will the budget be implemented in green spaces too?
Yeah, that's a great question. We are hoping to actually have a separate county-wide. We have had one for playground spaces, but actually one that starts to address more of the ground. So taking into account athletic fields and other spaces that could start to address maybe some larger outdoor needs as well. And that those, maybe that's all that is needed at that space, that we could address those on a one-off basis.
All right, this is a good general question about where will the questions and concerns from these meetings go, and what's the next step people can take to address what's the next step to address concerns?
Since this is the last of the community information session, really the next opportunity, you're always welcome to come to any board meeting. But if you're really focused in on the CIP, it would be the opportunity to, join those public hearings that we talked about, and the schedule is available. You're always welcome to email, Julie, DJ, and I, and it's helpful. I think we have certainly seen these questions, and we are trying to answer all of these, live as we go, and take that into consideration as we finalize the plan for the next few weeks.
So here's a question about how the projects are being procured. What's the funding stream, and have we considered alternative procurement options?
So most of the funding stream are bonds, and that comes from both county bonds. We also do get state funding. We always max out that state funding, and quite frankly could exceed it. There's a limit, and we always ask for the maximum that we are allowed, which DJ, correct me if I misspeak, but roughly around 40 million. It goes up and down each year a little bit. Anywhere from like 38 up to 42, but on average, it's about 40 for MCPS. Again, we could exceed that and far exceed that every year in terms of what projects are eligible to be state funded. So we are fully taking advantage of that. again, the majority are bonds. I think a lot of what people are also interested in, certainly people have been closely watching Prince George's County and their P3 model. That is something we are continuing to look at and see if that might be an opportunity for us. There is a lot that takes place with that, and there are no specific plans for us, but we are definitely talking with others, with that school district, with the state, and with the county to explore options such as that.
Someone's asking for a link to the slides.
Should be in the chat. It's the same slides that we use, so it's a board, it'll take you to board docs, but it's the same one. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I'm sorry. I think I'm sending only to hosts and panelists. Give me a second. That's probably why. Okay, sorry about that. And this was the other one, the CIP website, in case you wanted to scroll down and see the schedule at the very bottom.
All right, someone's asking about a specific decibel level considered acceptable for a classroom.
So there are, I do not remember them off the top of my head, but when we design any new building, there are specific decibel levels that we are designing, classroom spaces to versus gymnasium versus cafeteria. That is always taken into account in terms of replacement. Again, if it's specific to the dehumidifier, the goal is to really solve the humidity and moisture problems and remove those dehumidifiers. We would prefer to not continue to keep those in. So if this is Flower Valley, I'm happy to look at those in terms of the decibel level.
All right. Question about the status of the Damascus High School renovation project.
Great question, and will be part of the CIP consideration in October.
All right. I think some of the other questions had to do with recently completed feasibility studies and folks looking for information about those. And I can take that in saying that we're in the progress of getting final brochures developed from the architects and engineering consultants we worked with on the studies. We are also going out to communities where we haven't yet given a final presentation to do so. And as much as we are able to do so, sans some of the existing floor plans, we are posting information to our website under each individual project's websites. Okay, so there is a question about will holding facilities be taken into account for the boundary study? And do student needs beyond farms get taken into account? I assume for the FCI is what they're asking.
Sure, I'm fully, Julie, maybe you can quite understand the will holding facilities be taken into account for the boundary study?
I think they're asking if an existing school is involved in the boundary study, will that, yeah, it's a little murky for me as well. Maybe they can clarify and ask it differently. But I think we only have time for a few more questions. I wanted to catch some of the ones that have come in here. I think this is just about the suitability for an alternative education program in an elementary holding school. And from a population and facility standpoint, that is addressed because the facility is not even fully utilized by this by the size of the program, and facility modifications have been made to accommodate them. And then what about, sorry, they came in fast and furious at the end here. So just scrolling through. We must have missed a question about Argyle Middle School. I'm sorry. They're just asking for more information about that school.
I mean, it will be assessed, I guess is the best thing I can say. All schools built prior to 2023 will be assessed over the course of this calendar year. So, we think it's important for us to have a baseline across all of them, even if you don't see it in the first 50.
Okay.
I think there was also a question building off of that. How often are we assessing? So as Andrea just stated, the remaining facilities will be assessed this calendar year and next calendar year, this school year. And then our hope is to then periodically update, maybe a quarter of the portfolio each year following up. So this is sort of our baseline round, and then just continuously updating them. Once major work has been done, the depleted value will go down. So this should be an ongoing basis.
Sorry, I got busy typing some direct answers to folks. But I think that's about it for all questions that have come in, unless DJ, did you see anything else I might have missed?
Maybe I'll just end with, I think people want another contact besides their principal. We do think it's really important to keep the principals informed in all of this, but you're always welcome to email us directly. It is a lean team over here, and we will do our best to respond in a timely manner. But please don't, hesitate to reach out. Just mindful of my capacity, but I want to try to be as responsive as possible, again, while also trying to always keep the principal out of the loop. I think one thing that I hear from them quite a bit is them, hearing stuff through parents instead of directly from us. And so I want to, again, be mindful of that and keep them in the loop. Great. I think with that, we will wrap up for this afternoon. Thank you all for joining. Appreciate you participating and looking forward to the continued engagement this fall. Have a great afternoon, everyone.